Mr. Mark. Can you slide that desk over? Camera's picking it up. Okay, we're rolling.
Okay. Hi, my name is Mark.
Hi, Mark.
When standing up and attempting to convince an audience that our position is the correct position, we must be able to convey a story. Telling a story is a great way in order to engage the audience and command their attention. But commanding their attention is not the only mechanism that is used. Merely storytelling is not enough, but rather a debater must find a way to tell a story that the audience believes. After storytelling, one must highlight a problem. We must ask ourselves, what is the problem that the audience should care about? Lastly, the final component that I was able to take out of everyone's debate is that the framing of the debate itself. When we go up and speak in front of the class, we must ask ourselves, in what direction should I take this debate? For me, I decided to take economic benefits and frame that argument to starving children in Africa. Thesis. Since we as humans are always involved in argumentation, before we walked into this course, we all had qualities of good debating without the ability to detect BS. However, it took Professor Miller's guidance in order for us to be able to unleash these qualities that we never thought we had possessed while becoming more attentive to BS evidence. The significance. How did we gain the ability to critically think for ourselves? Guidance coupled with concepts from the book, as well as diligence and hard work based on concepts we developed in this course, will teach us to be up to any challenge when it comes to debating now and in the future. We will be able to become more effective debaters by the evidence we present and the vital storytelling strategy Dr. Miller presented to us. So, the question is, where did I start to witness my BS detector evolve? It all began with the text from this class written by Rick. After examining the book throughout the beginning of this quarter, I knew right away that framework was an essential tool at my disposal. The quote in Rick went something like this: just as the architect must adapt the structure of a building to meet the demands of the setting and its intended use, arguers must adjust their practices to the specifics of the situation at hand. From then on, I consistently looked to see if debaters in this course were able to reflect framework throughout their debate, and luckily everyone did. But everyone needs to be careful about good framework, because you can frame something and really go along with it and deceive people. So a good way of detecting BS is knowing whether or not that person presented good enough framework. This brings me to a story I have about the article which we read on Teaching How to Be Critical by John Passmore. The most compelling part of Passmore's article is when he puts forth an example of an undergraduate who reads Michael Black's book called Critical Thinking. He speaks of the undergraduate who can answer any questions we care to ask him about the content of Black's book, and he never for a moment doubts, however, that everything Black says is correct. He is content to learn by heart what Black says. Although the undergraduate can basically reflect on all the evidence contained within that book, Passmore admits that the undergraduate did not think of applying any of these skills he learned when reading the actual book. In summary, I have shown you that in order to convince an audience and prevent uncertainty or accusations of BS in your speech, one must adhere to storytelling, highlighting, and framework. These three lie at the heart of any successful public forum debate and decreases the chances of BS. To conclude, my BS detector has fully evolved as I began familiarizing myself with fallacies. Paying close attention to the structure of the line of reasoning during the debates can do wonders, and will eventually be the most important way for an individual to detect BS. Framing, storytelling, and highlighting are ways to prevent a debater from succumbing to the evils of fallacies. As for the tieback, powering up BS detection machines is a difficult task, especially in the heated affair of debate, when there are lots of broken logical arguments. However, one of the easiest things you can do during the debates is to listen closely and pay attention to whether a statement rings true to you personally. Just remember, our BS detector will continue to evolve, and we may not be able to catch every form of faulty evidence, but we can curtail some of that faulty evidence by continuing to strive to critically think. Thank you so much.
Thank you. What was the time?
I should go first
4:30.
because I'm sick, so I really appreciate that.
It's okay. Okay, Mr. Plane to catch.
I have an international flag, so I suggest we start from the back of the alphabet, but thanks, John. I apologize. And hi everyone. My name is John, and may I start?
Can you move this chair over a little bit? Mark, can you slide over
yeah.
that way a little bit? Yeah, you're in the camera. Okay, get in the center of the room now.
Can I start now?
Yes.
Okay. Time flies. Well, it seems almost yesterday I came into.
Where's your outline?
Oh, sorry.
Good job.
Could you start the timer now?
Mm-hmm.
So, time flies. It seems almost yesterday I came into this class being a firm supporter of anthropogenic global warming. However, now, after this, I started to have doubts about global warming. Well, what could have possibly happened in the past 10 weeks that changed my initial position so fundamentally? Well, I was immersed in the critical debating environment of this class, in which I was not only able to gain new information and knowledge about global warming, but also fine-tune my critical thinking skills. I do believe that these two things I learned in this class developed in tandem with my BS detector. And what is the significance of these three skills, you might ask? Well, I kindly answered that I believe they are valuable assets in the information age, in which we confront increasingly more competing claims than ever, and we are compelled, and I believe it is imperative for us to make critical decisions in a quick and accurate manner. So, first I would like to start off by telling you a story that will illustrate how knowledge grows hand in hand with my critical thinking and also my BS detector. So, as you might recall from the earlier portion of my speech, I am a firm supporter of global warming, and I do believe that carbon tax are inherently desirable. However, when I was assigned to debate against carbon tax, I was exposed for the first time of information from the other side. I started to know that America only produced 0.328% of the total carbon emissions, including that produced in the natural cycle. Well, this part about carbon tax that is insolvent to global warming prompted me to think critically about other aspects about carbon tax as well, such as the severe economic ramifications and consequences that my partner Ian suggested and illustrated perfectly. So this, I believe, confirmed Passmore's point that knowledge is in fact the basis of a critical mentality and critical thinking. I also wanted to add by saying that this more knowledge I gained allowed me to better detect logical fallacies made by my opponents and allow me to make more effective and powerful refutations. So secondly, I would like to tell you a story about how my critical thinking developed hand in hand and in tandem with my BS detector. Well, accurately, as Passmore observed in on teaching to be critical, he said that critical thinking is a character trait. That is to say, it is not something that can be taught. It's a personal character. The only way to encourage the development of such is to immerse the individual in an environment that is conducive to this character trait. And I cannot possibly imagine any environment more conducive and ideal than what we have now in this class. The cognitive inconsistency that naturally arises from the debate process sort of compelled me to think critically. Well, this critical mentality switched on my BS detector. I used to be someone, and I'm sort of ashamed of that, but I'm not that ashamed to share it with you guys, that I used to be someone who would instinctively nod along to one of my professors' obviously mistaken claim in her office hour. But now, I stopped taking any claim by their face value. In debates, I judge not by presuming they're right, but by presuming claim as incorrect, unless proven beyond reasonable doubt. And this sort of illustrates how my BS detector evolved in tandem with my critical thinking. So, how do we ultimately expand this application of the BS detector? Well, as I have illustrated in this class, in the earlier portion of my speech, knowledge and critical thinking are two important pillars of the BS detector. Well, without knowledge, it would be like reading a book written in a completely foreign language. It would be like a shot in the dark. However, Only knowing the knowledge, but not knowing the critical thinking skills, will be like what Mill classified in his book as ape-like imitation. So, I believe that the only way to enhance and expand our BS detector is to accumulate more knowledge, and secondly, apply the critical mentality to any question that we will confront in the future. And by doing so, I believe all of us in this class will become the critical thinker that the information age and society requires and desire us to be. And I wish you all, success in our future life. Thank you.
Thank you. What was the time? 4:53. Thank you. Okay, let's go with Stephanie Zhao. Hi, Steph. Oh, were you supposed to be next? Yeah, go ahead, go. Were you supposed to be next? Why don't you go?
It's okay.
Well, what was your excuse?
I have an interview.
Wait,
Oh, yeah,
tell me to go first. I wanted to make
I have another 2 hours to go.
Oh, he has 2 hours. He has 2 hours.
Also, I made speech for everyone today, so when you're done with your speech, you want to grab some.
What'd you? Fact leader, yeah, good. Good job, fact leader. Fact leader. Nice hat. What? Another one in Oregon, yeah. Okay, she's managing attention, communicating respect, finding friendly eyes near the front and the center. Say your name, feel the love. Start your speech.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie.
So I want to tell you guys a little story. When I was a child, I was 100% convinced that I would never ever eat sushi. One, because raw fish was completely unpalatable in color and it smelled of polluted ocean to me. And two, because its shiny flesh just suggested this analogy for whatever reason to me that eating some kind of raw meat was just a barbaric act, and that was something that did not go along with my moral compass. And three, I wasn't even sure how to consume it as a 12-year-old. I was just kind of watching other people use chopsticks, and yes, we do use them in our culture, but I was thinking, how am I supposed to eat this thing? Am I supposed to eat it from the top down or dissect it like, it's like a Kinder egg with little surprises inside? I really don't know. So, and in the end, all of my 12-year-old peers were telling me, sushi is gross, so you don't want to eat that. So, was this a valid critical conclusion? Now, as I look back on it, no. Passports on Teaching to be Critical says that imparting facts about criticism is not sufficient to make them critical. So through my personal experiences, I've realized that while rationality and deductive reasoning may cause us to arrive at particular conclusions, the implementation of critical thinking skills will expand our personal knowledge database through the illumination of new information, challenge our current perspectives, and transform our beliefs. And this yields more informed and valid decisions. So my significant statement during my debate for this class was that global warming on balance is not catastrophic. And this is something that I later found was, not entirely, or this is something that I found was a very controversial statement that I actually come to agree with more now. So to go back to my story, what I discovered was that there were two errors in my deductive reasoning conclusion to hate sushi. Okay, so the first is that I generalized after an initial encounter, after experiencing food poisoning and only trying one kind of sushi and just listening to my peers, I concluded, you know what, I absolutely hate this food. And the second was that my sources for the conclusion that this food was completely disgusting were a bunch of 12-year-olds who had absolutely no credibility whatsoever. I didn't search for new information as critical decision makers would, didn't note biases in underlying positions, and thus I had to conclude that my secondary credibility was unreliable. So, how does this tie in with anything that we learned in Comm 102? So this course is completely different from others at UCLA. It actually encouraged like a transactional model of communication rather than just a linear model of communication. It encouraged open dialogue about topics. For instance, in other courses, professors would simply lecture at you, and the criteria for judging the performance was the regurgitation of this material on either a paper or an exam. So one of the things, I experienced this firsthand in my freshman GE cluster, which was a cluster about environmental science. So 90% of the time, the lecture material that I learned was, had something to do with the fact that global warming was inherently deleterious, and no one would be able to refute that. And because the class was taught by a team of very knowledgeable research professors, what did I have anything to contend against that? So this made me conclude, after taking this class, that UCLA courses generally are not conducive to robust critical thinking because we rarely have a chance to present conflicting viewpoints, and in many instances are too afraid to do so. Office hours are often in out of course because students are too afraid, as my classmate mentioned, to speak up or even say anything against what the professor contended. So this class also taught me to be speculative in a way that was more than habitual. Critical thinking skills will help solve problems and analyze fallacies rather than accepting the obvious as the truth. So my first reaction to my significant statement for the debate was why the hell would I believe that global warming is not inherently catastrophic? That sounds completely crazy to me because media propaganda, research, consensus among peers, and even our very own higher education system imply that basically my partner and I were completely doomed to win this debate. Even so, the evolution of my BS detector was developed through this class, and through that I was able to question the credibility of sources more effectively locate flaws in rhetorical strategies such as logos, ethos, and pathos. And the last measure of improvement, which I truly think is a testament to the development of my critical thinking ability, is the consideration of alternative explanations. Okay, so Passmore indicated that critical thinking exhibits critical spirit, and in order to do so, we must be alert to the possibility that established norms might be rejected, that rules might be changed, and that criteria used in judging performance may be modified. So, in sum, this taught me how to be open-minded and not judgmental, and this is important because it saves time rather than wasting time obsessing over hasty conclusions like the fact that I hated sushi when I was a kid, and yet now I'm so obsessed with it that I eat it at least once or twice a month.
Thank you, Stephanie. Okay. What was the time?
5:15.
5:15. Okay, that brings us to Nick Williams. Thank you for bringing cookies for everyone. Let's give her a round of applause. Yeah. 5 minutes. 5 minutes minimum.
Is it's 5 minutes?
Minimum. Minimum.
I thought it was 5 minutes. Yeah, same here. I'll take it.
Okay.
I'll do half an hour.
It's 5 minutes.
Wait, what's the max?
Unlimited. Unlimited.
Roll.
No, maximum.
She's managing attention, communicating respect non-verbally, finding friendly eyes near the front and the center. Say your name, feel the love. Start your speech.
Hi guys, my name's Nick.
Hi, Nick.
So I guess just to start off, I'm going to start off with a quote from Forrest Gump, which is "Stupid is as stupid does." And basically what this means to me is people that are not informed or educated and don't do their research basically display these attitudes of what stupid is what stupid does. And not that the person is stupid, but they make uninformed decisions that aren't based on research. And before this class, I had a lot of instances of being stupid and not doing my research, not being well informed, and this class has taught me to move past this. So it has increased my critical thinking, and I think for all of us in our education, and knowing topics that we had no idea what they were, and becoming well informed on these topics. This leads me to my thesis. What I have learned has been substantial. It has been represented through my work. What I know now looks at questioning and criticizing different educational institutions. And lastly, the BS detector that I've had before versus what I have now, and how this has grown and established. The significant statement to kind of wrap everything up is, although a lot of classes at UCLA have taught me how to research and to be well informed, this is one of the only classes I've had where practical experience and having real world value comes into effect. So first I'm going to talk about my first main body paragraph of what I have learned. And this is teaching me to be more critical. So, Passmore represented in his Teaching to Be Critical article, the difficulty with critical analyzing is that you have to be critical about beliefs that you don't want to be critical to. And this is very relevant in my own life because starting a company 4 years ago as a DJ, I thought that I could basically play music that people are going to want to hear, and I'm able to play the music. So they basically have no influence on me, but I'm going to influence them. And this has greatly changed because basically back then music was my identity, and it still really is. Music is being my identity. And being able to play for other people and having to look at what their identity is and what they want to listen to really challenges this critical mindset of what music has meant to me. So I'm not saying that this class has fully changed this mindset. It's kind of been progressive over the years, but it has definitely helped influence and enhance the mindset I've already had. Okay, and then on the scholastic side, research and acceptance have increased with me as well. And through schools, that's through academic journals. I had no idea that academic journals existed through EBSCO or ProQuest or anything like that, and this class has taught me a lot and allowed me to write better papers because of it. So my second main body point is what I know now. And this is basically based off my 7th week journal article, which is about questioning evidence. And one of this in particular is I'm in a gender study class with Sam, and we're in a gender studies class, and there was an article we had to write on feminism. And some of the research that I found was kind of outdated and didn't seem to be fully accurate, so I actually I questioned her evidence, I questioned what she said would be true, did my own research, and was able to come up with a counter statement that I ended up writing a paper about. And although this wasn't necessarily accepted by her, we had some talks in office hours, and I ended up getting a better grade, and she actually ended up in the end saying that we both benefited because of this. So the increase of me being an independent speaker and thinker, and increase my increase my ability to analyze situations has definitely increased my education. So the last main body paragraph is how I have grown and increased my BS detector and how this functions in my life. So I'm going to use a story of my brother who is all about conspiracy theories. If you've ever heard of Alex Jones or the Illuminati, this is him. This is all he represents. This is all he believes in. And we've gotten in fights numerous times before. And because of this, we have there's been increase in emotional feelings have flared, and we've criticized each other. But looking at argumentation and critical decision making in our book of chapter 16 about politics, I've learned to act rationally and not act so emotionally charged toward these statements, but instead be more understanding towards his point of view, listen, and then respond with my arguments. Also, looking at critical thinking, another article we had for the class on tendencies, I've been able to withhold judgments when reasoning and evidence doesn't apply, or it's not there. Which means that I don't judge his character, I don't judge based on what I think is right, but I judge on what evidence I find to be true, or what different articles or authoritative sources I've found. So okay, so to wrap everything up, we can see as a summary, I've learned through not only my work life, but my job, my job, my school, my family. I've been able to become a more credible speaker, a more analytical thinker, and just overall a better person because of this class. And then in conclusion, my personality has truly changed. And again, I'm not saying that this is solely because of this class, but it's definitely enhanced my ability to be more accepting and agreeable towards people, be able to argue better against my family, and to question evidence that others hold, especially when it comes to authoritative sources, which I've never really been able to do in the past. And like I said, even though it didn't yield great outcomes in the beginning, it ended up being okay at the end. So to tie everything back, we can look towards the quote once again of what stupid is and what stupid does. And although I still perform a lot of actions that are stupid in my own life, and and I'm definitely not perfect, at least on the idea and side of research and in critical thinking, I can perform less stupid actions, I guess, per se, and become a better person because of it.
Thank you. What was the time? What?
5:40.
Okay, 5:20.
Is it 5 minutes maximum or 5 minutes minimum?
I already asked.
Nice hat.
5 minutes minimum. So what is the maximum?
Well, if you go over 6, you know, you're in trouble, but 5 to 6
Like actually
is good,
trouble?
yeah. You can go 6.
Yeah, he'll throw you out of the class.
That would suck.
Okay, that brings us to Valentine. Darwin Valentine.
Valentine.
Hi, Darwin. Okay, one step back, please. Yeah, good. He's managing attention, making sure everyone's looking up, finding friendly eyes near the front and the center, communicating respect to his audience non-verbally. Say your name, feel the love, start your speech.
Hi everyone, my name is Darwin.
Hi, Darwin.
When I was trying to think of a story to be able to illustrate exactly what I learned, what really came to me is understanding that this whole class in itself has been a story within my own life, a story for the last 10 weeks where I've been able to have the opportunity to debate and to have the opportunity to research, to critically engage with everyone in the class. Stepping into the class, I remember when Professor Miller would ask us, whenever we would raise our hand, to stand up, reiterate our name over and over, and then make our arguments. And he would always stress the fact that when we made arguments, we always had to reference other people that stood up and said something, whether we disagreed or we agreed with them. But this process taught me so much in my own life about being more critical about any argument that came across my own mind, that came across in the article, and most importantly, that came across in the debate process. But I'd like to focus on 3 things today. The first is the brief and the debate process and what I learned. As mentioned by the 2 speakers before, Professor Miller really stressed creativity from the classroom. He didn't hold your hand, he gave you the opportunity to really research your topic, and to really stress how you would approach arguing that topic. My first topic with Madison was really in regards to a topic that I personally didn't believe in, but I was able to research based on not what Professor Miller told me to research, but really my own creativity regarding media sensationalism, regarding what I felt was a better argument than only having a few facts. At the same time, I realized that you have to leave your arguments behind you. And that comes back to where I said I didn't believe in the argument that I was making, but I soon realized that in order to do an efficient job and to do a good job, I had to go back, approach it from a fresh perspective, research what I had to do, and then be able to evaluate it based on a theme that I could present to you all. Because as mentioned within the article that we had to refer to in our essay, it's very important not to indoctrinate your audience. Most important is that you have to be able to guide them in the right direction as far as what you're trying to make, as far as what argument you want them to be able to process. And that's really what it came down to when it came to the debate process. Understanding your audience and then being able to tailor your information to them. But I also realized from the same aspect you have to be creative. Creative in how you approach it. Danielle mentioned last time that she was able to take a few facts and present them in a form that almost made it seem like she had a lot of facts. That to me is creativity. Creativity in working with what you have, even if it's in small numbers. To make it almost seem like your information belittles the other side's information. But at the same time, in the debate process, I learned that it comes down to quality and style. Quality in what you say. As evidenced by a few of my peers in the first debates, it wasn't enough to just regurgitate facts, or policies, or values. It was really about focusing on the quality that everybody else can understand. And that's what we made. We made ample use of examples like NASA. Like Patel mentioned NASA in our debate, and that was very useful because everyone was able to relate. But all this comes back to the idea of a critical argument. And being able to understand that an argument is through its substance. It doesn't have a yes or a no, but it has arguments on both sides of the spectrum. And this is the culture that Miller was able to establish in the classroom from the get-go. When he was emailing us at 4 a.m. in the morning, expecting us to read those articles. It was very important that we understood both sides of the argument. That's exactly why he would send articles that really talked about the pros and the cons of global warming or global climate change. But as I understood quickly, we have to evaluate arguments based on its merits, based on what the facts said. Being able to evaluate facts, not because they were facts, but the way in which they were interpreted was more important. At the same time, through this process is really what lies in tandem with the BS detector, and how we're able to reflect and reevaluate our own ideas when we listen to other people's information. I soon realized in the first few weeks I was way too passive. I would allow people just to tell me information, evaluate their debate based on that, and then make a decision. But I soon realized that everybody actually wasn't doing that. People were actually being a lot more critical as the weeks went on, and looking at what they were saying, and then evaluating whether those facts were misconstrued, or if those facts were even relevant to the argument. But lastly, I just want to touch upon how this class left a sturdy foundation. A foundation to be critical in how we approach our own arguments. A foundation to make sure that we do our own research. Regardless of whether or not you come in, or we all came in and thought that this was a no-brainer topic of global climate change, something that was present within the media, something that was very mainstream. I soon realized that this class was going to be a lot tougher than I thought, because we're going to have to research sides of the arguments that we didn't necessarily believe in. But really that research process has taught me more than I've ever learned from watching CNN or watching a documentary on my free time. But the reality is, and my last main point, is to make sure that we always reflect. Reflect on the ideas, cultivate the skill necessary, and always be critical. Thank you.
Thank you. Time?
5:25.
25, thank you. Okay, that brings us to Michelle Sun. Hi, Michelle. How you doing? Good. Mark, can you get your leg out of the camera's picture? Thank you. Okay.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
Okay, so as I said last time, I don't like to debate. In fact, before I came to UCLA, I wrote this list of all of my fears in a notebook, and debate was like one of the top 3. Okay. And the main reason for this is because I get really nervous, as you all have known by now. And it doesn't matter how much I prepare. I played for piano for about 15 years, and every year we would practice these 4 pieces, and then I would choose these pieces and I would practice them with my teacher for about a year, and then after that we would give recital. And so I practiced for a year, but then when I went to the recital, I really didn't do that well. Like, I would make mistakes all over the place, and there's this one time at this one recital when I just completely forgot what I was about to play next. So then I stopped, and then I turned to the audience and I said, "Can I just restart this?" And they're like, "Okay." And then they played it. So that's how nervous I can get. So in my debate, I also made a ton of mistakes, and that was very evidenced by the final score, which was 22-4. But I'm really proud that I got through it, because I participated in a formal debate. And I faced one of my fears, and now that I took the class, I now know about communicative argumentation. And this is actually really different from other kinds of argumentation, I guess. Because before I came to UCLA, I also took this other class which was about logic. And in that class we learned about syllogisms, we learned about sorties, which I thought was called sororities until sorties. But logical fallacies and all of these computer language statements like and statements, or, and, null. And we use all of these kind of devices to analyze written text. But in the end, I didn't really learn about like argumentation between people. We didn't have to come up and make speeches. We just took tests, and then at the end there was this one test where there was a guy who brought in Starburst, and I was really happy about that. Yeah, so I didn't learn about argumentation between people. I just learned about pure logic. So that didn't really fulfill the fear that I wrote inside my notebook. So when I first took this class, I thought it was going to be the same old thing as soon as I opened the book and I saw things about informal fallacies, but I was totally wrong. Because when we came in, we learned to actually argue, which is really different, which is not just written text, but between people. And different from written text is that you have to analyze different things such as credibility. In this class, when we watched the speech about Al Gore, we were thinking about him as a politician, how he might have agendas and all kinds of things like that, which I didn't consider before. It's something you wouldn't consider inside a written text. And also, in debate, delivery is really important. There were a lot of people everyone came up here and debated, and we got to see all kinds of different debate styles. And what I learned was that delivery is, in some cases, really a lot more important than the content that you deliver. You have to be loud, you have to speak in a very convincing way, you have to be confident. And I noticed that, especially with Darwin, with Patil, with Priscilla, and all of them spoke very precisely and articulately, and because of that, I was able to digest their points. There are some speakers in here, me included, who didn't speak so well, and because of that, I might have just totally zoned out and I didn't listen to what you say. I'm sorry. So very quick about the BS factor, again, which I learned was between people. And we learned to rate people by a set of criteria, which is again about the person, like how, was this person a professor, was they a political figure, and also the date, the relevancy, like was this topic even related to the argument, and also the logic flow, which we learn how to do by writing all these argument charts and like flowing the arguments. So then on the book on teaching to be critical, what I really learned was that learning to be critical is really hard to define itself. You read the article, it was like 10 pages long. And in the end, so what he said was that it was really dynamic, it's really hard to put down in words. And that in the end there are these different components. You have all of these techniques you have, but then there's also creativity, thinking on your feet. And I thought that was a lot like art. In art, you learn all kinds of brush strokes, but at the end, you just have creativity, and that's a lot more than just a skill. And so in much the same way, and I'm going to quote from the book here, the need for building up a body of knowledge, a set of habits from which criticism can take its departure. So in summary, this class taught me a lot more about how to learn critically. Thanks.
Thank you. What was the time? 20. Ooh. Okay, that brings us to Nathan Stark. I need your outline.
Oh yeah. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Nathan.
Hey, you're welcome.
Okay, right. Step forward. Another step. Yeah.
Okay.
One step back. Perfect.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Nathan.
Hi, Nathan.
I'm, trying to recall a story, about what led me to this point, and I began to think about when I was in high school, and the anger and uncertainty that I felt as I sat in my English class trying to learn about the Canterbury Tales, how awful that story was. So I had a teacher that had basically provided us with an interpretation, and how well we can memorize and regurgitate that interpretation would, that's how we would be graded. As Passmore would have said, this guy was an indoctrinator rather than an educator. And then I got to college, and I thought I was good at critical thinking. And it seemed like the more information that I learned, the more I realized I didn't know. And then that is especially true with this class. I didn't know anything about climate change. The survey on the first day of class just showed me that I knew nothing about global warming. I didn't know fracking existed, and I had no idea what I would take away from this class. I witnessed all the intelligent and informed decisions of my classmates, and I felt bad, honestly, about myself that I couldn't contribute to that because I didn't know anything about anything. So I decided to do some research. I read the book, I did the journals, and I learned a few things that were pretty interesting. I learned that people often offer reasons for their behavior even though you don't ask for them, and I did that myself. I learned that my behavior changes as a function of the authority that I give to other people. It's basically the Milgram experiment every day of my life. And I noticed that there are many causal assertions in advertising that I didn't even realize. Gillette tells me that I can get Kate Upton to go on a date with me if I use their products, but she hasn't called yet. And then I watched the debates, and those were great for me because you guys provided me with more information than I could have ever would have gained for myself. What was most impressive is that you guys provided such different perspectives from the same objective measurements. And I thought that was, it's unbelievable. Because I knew nothing about it, so I went in with an open mind, and it was great. But when I judged the debates, as the time went on, I realized that I judged not only on what was being said, but what wasn't being said, how it was being said, what sources you were using, and how credible those sources seemed to me. And when it came time to give my analysis for each of these debates, I was never told whether my assessments were right. And that kind of frustrated me. I've always been told in my classes, like, you're on the right track. This is what you should know. This is what you'll be graded on. And I wasn't provided that, but I feel that that's what is going to make this class helpful because regardless of what I know now, regardless of where I'll be in the future, the ability to think critically and analyze everything is going to be very beneficial. So, as Passmore said, there are two different types of questions that the teacher will ask you. One in which the teacher knows the answer and the student doesn't know, and the other where both of them know the answer. And with no discredit to you, to anybody in this class, I feel all these debates are about questions where nobody knows the answer. It truly is up for debate. And I'm happy that I've been given the opportunity to think critically, to not be told what to say or how to think. And I feel like that's going to be extremely beneficial. Thank you very much. Everybody.
Thank you. What was the time? 45. Okay, have a good international flight. Say goodbye to John. Bye, John. Drive safely. Hope he's not flying. What's the name of that airline that got lost? He's not flying Malaysian Air. Okay, that brings us to Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
What's up, sir? What's up?
Hi guys, I'm Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
And I kind of want to take this in a little bit of a different direction than a lot of people have been doing. Yes, disapproving. No, I thought you guys have all been doing really great, and I don't know how this is going to work out for me, but I kind of want to look at this class from a micro to macro perspective, kind of take all the really basic things we learn in a textbook, some of that like first chapter stuff that a lot of us might have skimmed over because we're like, oh, this is easy, I know this. But, you know, that stuff really builds on top of the other stuff, and then you see in the debates how, when you're seeing it in person as opposed to in the textbook, how those little things really matter, and that, for me, was what was most beneficial, what I learned the most. So kind of the first thing that, you know, first week stuff, I'm just going to remind you that in this class we talked about 3 types of claims: fact, value, and policy. And that seems really simple, but for me, like, it took me a while to kind of differentiate between them, because you don't usually think of, you don't usually try to categorize the claims that you see in everyday life. And it was really, for me, realizing that the fact is just about stating what information is out there. You know, it's just about debating, like, is this what's out there, is that what's out there? And a lot of times it has to do with the consensus in whatever subject area you're talking about. So for us, we talked about what does the scientific community accept as information about the environment and what's happening. Value takes it a little bit further, and that talks about, okay, we have these facts, but what does that mean? What importance does this have for us and for our lives, and how can we look at this in a way that's most beneficial to us? You know, and a lot of the debates up here kind of talked about the environment versus the economy, and what's more important, and there are, you know, important moral kind of consequences for both of those, so it's never really an easy decision. Finally, we have the policy debates, and that, to me, was the most confusing, because I would get confused between, like, value and policy. But it's really about taking a policy or a value debate and kind of going that one step further, where you take those facts, you take the importance of those facts, and you try to actually create, like, okay, here's what we're going to do about it. Like, here's an end goal, here's a regulation, here's a law, here's something that we're actually going to concretely do. And, you know, for all of those types of claims, we use 3 different types of support. We use evidence, which is what we normally think of when we think of support. That's, you know, your statistics, your examples, your testimony. That's the stuff that you looked online, on ProQuest, or, you know, JSTOR or whatever. And then we also have other types of support that maybe, you know, before coming to this class I never really thought of necessarily consciously as, like, this is support, like values, you know, what kind of, how am I appealing to, you know, the logos and the ethos and all that for my audience? Like, I need to make this relate to them. I need to make this important to them. And also credibility, which, honestly, from standing up here in the debates, and now this is when we're moving one step higher to going from the textbook to the debates, I realized to my surprise that credibility was actually probably the most important form of support, because regardless of what anyone was saying, regardless of their information, regardless of, like, what kind of, like, you know, heartstrings they were trying to pull, if they were, you know, if they came up here and they were maybe had, like, not a nice speaking style, or maybe they were dressed sloppy, like, it wouldn't matter. I just wouldn't really pay attention to what they were saying, or it would really make me, like, subconsciously, like, be less willing to believe whatever they were saying. And so from there, I kind of want to move on to my BS detector. And in this, now we're going to kind of, this is going to seem really opposite of what I've been saying, but what I learned most about the BS that you can see up here is people's appearance, and how that's total BS. Because, you know, it's so easy to get caught up on kind of like, oh wow, like, he talks really nice, he dresses really nice, but, you know, a lot of times that can kind of blind you from what they're saying and whether or not there's, like, actual real support for their information. So basically what I'm trying to say is that for the speaker, it's really important to understand that how you look, how you talk, that stuff really matters. Like, even if the audience isn't trying to let that affect them, it's subconsciously really affecting how they're going to listen to you. But for the audience, it's really important to look past appearance and notice like, okay, is this person actually saying anything substantial? Are they even making a claim, or are they just attacking their opponents? And like, are they just trying to, win with ad hominem? And so basically that's kind of what I've learned from this class, and I feel like those are things that are going to help me not only in my academic career, but also when I go on into my professional life and I'm, faced with like decisions and like, my business or whatever I plan to do. So, thank you. Sorry if it was boring, but...
Thank you.
Any stories from my childhood or anything like that?
Okay, that brings us to Kevin.
What is this?
Par 5. I need your,
But they're awesome.
There you go.
Thank you.
Exactly. Like in the legislature,
Okay, stands before you, managing attention, communicating respect, non-verbally, finding friendly eyes near the front and the center. Say your name, feel the love, start your speech.
Hi, I'm Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
We've been asked to reflect upon the last 10 weeks. We've been asked to reflect on what we've learned, what we know now, and to talk a little bit about a BS detector. Well, throughout all of this, I found there was a missing element. There was a missing element that none of our texts referred to, and I think is very important towards evaluating the BS detector and also in our lives. Our text, Argumentation and Critical Thinking, our textbook, fails to mention this other than in 3 sentences. And the first one is saying, we're going to talk about this. The article we read had an opportunity to talk about this element, but totally dropped it as well. The element we're talking about here is competence. Competence is defined as the ability to do something successfully or efficiently. And don't have fear that our authors have failed to tell you about it. I'm going to tell you about it, and I think you might be able to take something away that will help you throughout your life. So, the story of competence. Let's start with the 4 stages of competence. The first stage of competence is unconscious incompetence. What that means is you just don't know that you don't know. In other words, stupid is as stupid does. And all people are affected by unconscious incompetence in most things. In very few things are we actually so knowledgeable that we can call ourselves competent. This is why the author, Mr. Passmore, addresses a habit of questioning. People believe that when they ask questions, they're smart, they're educated on something, or they can be part of a discussion. But that is not competence. See, the problem is we're not critical with ourselves as much as we need to be. When we began this class 10 weeks ago, first class, we had a survey. The survey was about global warming. A lot of us didn't answer the don't know questions. We picked whatever, left or right, yes or no, whatever our belief was. And I think a lot of us have found, throughout our research and becoming more competent, that our initial beliefs were wrong. And that's the problem with our society, is we have a lot of information out there, and we take bits and pieces from everywhere and draw conclusions that can be fallacious. So, this leads to the second stage of competence. This is the most important stage of competence because what it is conscious incompetence. You know that you have no idea about a certain thing. You know so well that you don't know about something that you admit. And that's the first stage of becoming competent. Now, once you're at this stage, you can really enable yourself to get to the point of using the BS detector, to get to the point of being competent and knowing something about a subject. That's the third point. Conscious competence. You know that you know. You have to think about it, but you know that you know. This stage enables you to make judgments. You've done research, You spent a lot of time revising your research, and at this point, you're able to use your BS detector. That's why we were instructed to do a lot of research before we did our debates. It was to find as much information as possible and become as educated as possible so that we could actually put our BS detector to use. I am very appalled that our text didn't talk about competence, because without competence, the BS detector doesn't work. So, once you're competent, you enable the BS detector, which leads to the fourth stage, unconscious competence. Excuse me. Once you're unconsciously competent, you're essentially an expert at something. You can do something without thinking about it. It becomes second nature. Or you know so well about it that you've gotten to the point where you start doubting how much knowledge you really have in it. But you really know so much. And that's the stage where we want to get to in life. We want to get to the place where we can have so much knowledge that we're so confident that we're starting to think, okay, how confident am I really? Because now you're competent in something. And folks, that's the concern with society, is we have too much information and absolutely too few competent people. So what I ask you to do is think about, if there's one thing you take away, think about being consciously incompetent. Because when you are in life and you're faced with a challenge or you're faced with a discussion or a topic, and you ask yourself, how competent am I? Once you make it to the state of once you make it to the state of conscious competence, you've arrived at learning to become competent. All right, enough with the word competent. Let's take a step back. Try to remember whatever you can remember. What I did is I wrote these 4 levels on the wall in my room, and every morning I'd look at it. Because every morning I wake up and the first thing that pops into my head is the fact that there's something going on in my life that I have to think about. There's always a problem, there's always something that needs a resolution. And this chart really helped me from jumping to conclusions that I really shouldn't be making. Thank you.
Thank you. 525, okay. Okay, that brings us to Janine, also known as Chica. I need your, one step forward. Yeah, perfect. Okay, she stands before you, managing attention, communicating respect non-verbally. Finding friendly eyes near the front and the center. Say your name, feel the love, start your speech. Hi, Jenna.
So coming to this class, what I really wanted to learn is to make better arguments and make them more convincing. And I've always been interested in communication studies, and I wanted to practice a little bit of public speaking before I graduated. So we learned a lot about speaking in front of an audience. And in this class, there's definitely many interesting personalities, and I feel like we learned to talk to a varied audience. This also taught me that you have to know who you're presenting to, because that affects a lot how the message will be received. In this class, there was sympathetic, criticizing, aggressive, and even adorable responses from what I observed, and this variety helped me to think about presenting to different audiences in the future. We also learned a lot about introducing ourselves, and that's definitely something that I took with me to other classes where we practice public speaking, and I always remember to introduce myself. We also learned about the debates and writing outlines, which was a very valuable lesson in my opinion, and I'm sure that we'll use it later in life. What I know now is that we have to learn how to present, not only what to present, but also how to present. So we need to use ethos, logos, and pathos, and not only have the facts and evidence, but also appeal to the audience. You must also relate to the audience and have your arguments presented in a convincing and clear way to make your points. I also learned that sometimes you have to improvise and know how to act in different situations. And for example, when we're debating, I should have improvised in the midst of the rebuttal and taking into account the things that the opposition was saying throughout the debate. For example, Arnold appealed to children in third world countries, and I should have used that to make my own point stronger. So I learned that paying attention is key. I also learned much more about global warming after taking this class. I've always been interested in the topic and kind of biased to the side that global warming is a real man-made issue. The articles and research material that we read in this class widened my perspective, and I learned a lot about the government's role in this class. But I also really learned about critical thinking, and it enhanced it for me because before this class, my dream car was a Bentley, and I was thinking about getting towards a better car than I have now. But now, after the first couple of weeks, I was totally convinced that I should get a Tesla next. And then, as the weeks went by, I was thinking that I'm really like irrational, like I'm just jumping from one bandwagon to one. And I started researching why Tesla is popular and what's the story behind that car. And I came to the conclusion that I have to settle for kind of like best of both worlds. So that's what I did with like using critical thinking, and I'm thinking of buying a Mercedes-Benz that's half electric and half hybrid. So working on the argumentation journals really helped my BS detector to become stronger in resisting BS, because I learned a lot about not just listening to the claim, but also wanting more evidence. As Professor Miller always says, fascinating claim, got any evidence? So I really like that claim, and different exercises in the journal helped me a lot with arguments in my daily life, because I feel like it made me think about how other people view and present issues. It taught me how to make people explain their claims and support their facts more. And I don't anymore just believe things I hear, but I also examine the reasoning behind it. Unfortunately, my BS detector has evolved to the point where I question most of the things that I hear, and I have a lot of skepticism in facing people's claims. But fortunately, it's helped me think more clear and be more selective in the information I process and acknowledge to be true. Also, the BS detector relates to things in this class where I've learned that people blow their own cover sometimes, and they might say things like, I'm not really educated, or I'm kind of stupid in this, and I feel like that really blows your cover, and people detect when you don't know something. So that's been a lesson for me going to law school, that kind of do your research and know your stuff and don't blow your cover. I've also learned that people will say anything they want you to hear, and also say things that sound appealing to you, and words can be used for manipulation very easily. For example, one of my friends always makes suggestions and things in the way that you think that they're your ideas, but they're not. So she might say, well, I'm not sure, I would do choice A, but no, actually do whatever you want. I don't want to influence your choice. And in this class, I've learned that that's kind of planting a seed in your brain, and that's not your own thought. So people do this often, and your brain automatically starts to process that information. But now I've become more critical in hearing and processing arguments. And also, a lot of this class I've reflected with my little sister, who also took speech and communication classes, and I've really taken an approach to not kind of believe everything that I say, also not explain myself too much, and not say words like sorry if I don't really mean sorry. So it's helped me in communication. And on teaching to be critical, John Passmore states that being critical is more of a character trait than skill. And Aristotle claims we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act but a habit. And these two ideas intertwine show that what we repeatedly do become a habit and part of our characters. And that is why engaging in critical thinking is important to do repeatedly, so that it becomes our character and becomes more natural for us. Critical thinking and being able to judge claims is an essential part of being a rational thinker and a wise human being. So this class has been a real pleasure to be a part of, and I've learned many valuable lessons in communication studies. And differing from my major philosophy, it was a really great breather before graduating and enhancing my critical thinking more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to On Nugent.
It's win.
Win. Lose the hat. Thank you. Come forward a few steps, please. Right there. Good. Okay, he's managing attention, communicating respect, finding friendly eyes near the front and the center. Say your name, feel the love. Start your speech.
Hey guys, my name is An.
Hi, on.
A successful guru was once asked, how do you become successful? So this young man asked this guru, how do you become successful? This guru then said, if you want to know how to become successful, come meet me at the beach. So, at the beach, the guru said, come with me. Come with me towards the ocean. And they slowly start pouring to the ocean until they're about waist deep. And when they were about waist deep, this young man was thinking, God, this guy's crazy. What is he doing? And the guru kept on insisting, come on, come a little deeper. Deeper they went, the higher the water got. Until the young man could no longer breathe. And then the young guru started pushing this young man down to make sure he could not breathe. And just about the moment when he was about to pass out and drown, the guru saved his life, or didn't kill him. And the key to being successful is you have to want it more than you want to breathe. You have to want it so much that you, like the guru and this lesson, want to breathe. So, let's take a journey with me. Do you guys want to breathe? So, in the process of learning how to increase my BS detector, I went through the debates. And my first debate, I had a very competent partner, Kevin. He sold me on competence. You know, he'll probably sell you, he'll probably sell fish to water. He's great. So Kevin was really great, and he really complimented me bringing in the debate, and he really instilled like professionalism and stuff that I didn't have. And going into knowing what it is a great argument is. So the use of evidence also is essential in authoritative evidence, as you know, even though like Nivian, even though he didn't use any evidence, my opposing partner, he was very authoritative in his speaking style, and that really adhered a lot of you guys to his argument. So I felt that speaking from authority or speaking using a lot of evidence could help your case. And I also learned to, in a fair debate, to open discovery as soon as possible. I did not do that in my first discovery. These poor guys got it like 7 hours before, and that was unfair. And I also learned that, you know, fair discovery is very essential to having a good debate. So now to the evolution of my BS detector. Patchmore says that critical thinking is something that must be honed constantly. And throughout the debate and throughout journals, I've honed my critical thinking process. Me and my brother, we were discussing, we were just joking around, and you know, he got into like your rear bumper, you know, some guy hit him, and then my first thought was, you know, your Lil Saigon, was this guy Asian? And you know, the funny part was he was Asian. So he said, and then he said, you know, all Asians are bad drivers. So in one of my journals, I said, well, you know, I said to him, well, that's an interesting statement. Do you have any evidence? And then he was looking at me like, what the hell are you thinking? And then I just laughed. And so I did a little research. According to the National Highway Institute, Caucasians are in the most fatal car accidents. So Asians are not the worst drivers. Caucasians are. Patchmore also says that critical thinking is able to identify fallacies. If you remember in Nivian's argument how he related, you know, the basketball analogy to my increasement of Moore's law, increasing of the transistors in computers. That had nothing, absolutely whatever to do, and was a flawed analogy because it had nothing to do with computers. But you guys grant adherence to it. So, in conclusion, I thought that in order to evolve your BS detector, my BS detector, you have to constantly question what he's trying to say. You know, Ian had a little knock, and I was like, oh, you know, he got me there. But thinking back, it was a fallacious argument. And you guys really went through and actually listened to what he was trying to say. He was spewing a bunch of bullshit. So, to summarize, the evolution of my BS detector was to go through and really question what it is. Question what it is to be successful. As Socrates said, you know, if you want to breathe, well, Socrates didn't say that, but Guru once said, if you want to breathe, come with me and, you know, learn to breathe. But Socrates did say, right, the only thing I know, to profess in knowing, is that I know nothing. So that's what you have to come into argument by, you know, knowing nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I go next?
If your name is Thomas Murray, you can.
Now for some four-step reputation.
Stanford, moving up in the world. Okay, he's managing attention, communicating respect, finding friendly eyes near the front and the center. Say your name, feel the love, start your speech.
Alright, I am Thomas. I'm not Nivian, like UCLA next, but hopefully I'll show that I'm competent, as Kevin touched on earlier. I don't have a cool guru YouTube story, although I recognize that, so right on. So yeah, I think the last debate I was in prior to this class was probably in about 4th or 5th grade, and I was perfectly okay with that being my last one. I probably didn't lose as bad as I did now, so I don't know if my skills have deteriorated or what it was, but the competition's gotten better, I don't know. But basically I want to, so yeah, also I wanted to point out that I didn't really need to take this class to graduate, I just needed to take Spanish, but I'm happy I took the class. So, and I also want to say, like, I'm not sure why still standing up and delivering speeches in front of the class is like a nerve-wracking thing. I'm usually very okay with talking to people one-on-one, but something about being in front of all of you guys is like a little bit overwhelming. But I'll try my best here. So I think argumentation overall just receives a bad rap, for myself included. Prior to taking this class, I usually am not one for arguing with people. I'm very like neutral for the most part, except on some certain issues. But I usually find myself kind of treading like the middle ground. I don't really pick sides too often. And I think with criticism similarly, I'm not a huge fan of it. Like Kevin touched on, I think it is very good to be honest with yourself though, and I think this class has helped me be a little bit more honest with myself, which is never a bad thing. And also just in receiving criticism too, because I mean during our speeches we had about an hour to debate and about an hour to take criticism. So that was perhaps harder than the actual debate itself. So luckily you guys won't be providing criticism after this debate, or this speech, but so that was kind of an interesting part of the class. I think one thing that will stay with me long past this class is the nice claim, where's the support? Even though I didn't really do too much during the class, you just said it a lot, Professor Miller. And I think checking previous opinions at the door is also another thing that I do truly think I've gotten better at. I think with a lot of debates here, I came into this class after seeing an inconvenient truth like 10 years ago, and assuming that the global warming debate was over. Like Al Gore had sold me on it, I was convinced. Maybe it's because I felt bad he lost the presidential race, but I was like, dude, it's over, there's no debate. I don't understand why this is the topic for a whole quarter. So I think through the debate process, I really was able to hold those previous beliefs at the door, like I said, and actually listen carefully to people, what they were saying, and actually side with opinions previously I would have never held. So I thought that was pretty interesting over the quarter. And I also think during this quarter, I've also just came away from this a little bit more puzzled overall about the issue of global warming. I mean, some issues I think I'm a little bit more clear, but overall I'd say on the whole, I'm probably much more in the don't know category now. Is that a good thing? I don't know. Everyone here seems to think so. And I also think the critical attitudes have also gone to other parts of my life. I find myself around my apartment mates and my roommates just a little bit more like, nice claim, where's your evidence? And I also have realized that some arguments aren't worth getting into with people who don't even base their claims on any solid evidence. So I've also learned to be a little bit more reserved and just disagreeing outright with people, because when you're arguing with someone who's illogical or just lacks logic, the argument's going to go nowhere. So I found that to be pretty helpful. And I think going into the future, I will continue to seek impartiality on issues, especially ones that I don't know a lot about, and conduct my own research on topics that are especially of interest to me. And I also think what other things have I learned? I think this class, while it is an argumentation class, has also been in part a public speaking class as well. I know a lot of people in here said they were trying to work on their public speaking. I think everyone has gotten exceptionally better in the course of this quarter. And I'd like to think that I've gotten a little bit better too, because these classes don't always come around. I'm in my last quarter here, and this is the first public speaking argumentation class I've taken here. So I found that to be important as well. And as for my BS detector, which I have not touched on, I have about 30 seconds to touch on. I think let's see what I said about that. My BS detector, I think, has gotten better, like I said earlier with my roommates. Just recognizing that some people I wouldn't say are even worth listening to, but just recognizing that some people just really stand on a bunch of fallacious claims. They're just evidence. And to even seriously consider some of what they're saying just is sort of a waste of time. So I think in that respect, my BS detector has evolved somewhat, perhaps a little bit too critically, but nonetheless, I think it has evolved. So I can't really read anything else in my note card. I wrote so small. So with that, I think I'm going to conclude. So
thank you, Tom. Okay, next is Wing. Hi, Wing.
Hi everyone, I'm Wen. To start off, I wanted to talk about, actually I was quite struggled whether or not to take this class at the very beginning of quarter, because as a senior who only needs a few more units to graduate, actually many of my friends are taking REC classes, but rather I decide at the end I choose to take Professor Miller class, because I think I choose to take Professor Miller class again as a challenge to overcome my fear in public speaking, and I was glad that I made this decision because I learned so much that was far from what I had expected at the beginning. And in the past, the only thing I know about global warming was from the textbook in my high school, which says that global warming was disastrous and carbon dioxide was the culprit of the cause for global warming. This was until the movie I watched in the classes and the first fact debate we had. I realized that carbon dioxide actually only accounts for a very small proportion amount of all of the greenhouse gases, and it even works to cool the temperature. My position that human is largely responsible for global warming was therefore challenged over time throughout the quarter. Actually, I was also quite surprised to know how my answer is born in the survey came out entirely different after the quarter. For example, I remember that at the very beginning, I felt like that reducing carbon emission is a very good policy to mitigate global warming, but right now I feel like that perhaps this wasn't the case. And so what I've learned from this class? Actually, I feel like I learned so much that how to present logical arguments with claims with scientific evidence, how to do the research, how to evaluate the source, and how to organize my brief. And what's more, one thing that I learned from the class is the use of pathos during my speech. For example, in the ban fracking debate, I appealed to emotion by emphasizing that environmental concern should be put before material gain, and I support this with the story of how a woman's meteorological system was damaged due to fracking. And in fact, not only did I benefit from my own debate, but I also benefited while I was listening to our speech from my classmates. For example, I learned from Nathan that using question to end his speech sometimes is an effective strategy, because this really reminds your audience what is the focus of your own debate, and especially when the decision is so hard to make. And perhaps I would use this technique if I have a chance to debate with the other next time.
Yeah.
In fact, listening to our speeches also helped me to expose my own weaknesses and strengths in a debate. For example, I feel like in this class, many of our classmates are actually very good speakers. And for example, like Madison, you're very strong, very assertive and convincing whenever you're presenting your case. And Nivian simply was very good at using analogy to present his logical arguments. And On was really a good storyteller that his speech was never disappoint his audience. And perhaps this is something that I still need to learn in the future. So you would ask, how did my BS detector evolve over the course of a quarter? First of all, what I feel like most is that expect my beliefs to be challenged. This was the first time that I felt like my personal beliefs were challenged over many times in a single class through a quarter. For example, before a debate, I have a strong perception that fracking should be banned, basically because it brings numerous harms to the environment. But my position did somehow sway to the opposition after listening to the thoughtful presentation of how fracking actually caused huge economic impacts to our economy and how the new fracking techniques actually could somehow solve the problems as I mentioned. Second is questioning. This states that we shouldn't accept anything as an important truth without examining the sources. This is true in our debate process because we learn to evaluate our own evidence and also question the credibility of our opponent's evidence. To continue to expand this BS detector, I believe the best way is to keep challenging ourselves what we have already believed, what we want to believe, because I feel like this is exactly what we should question the most. And one way to do this is to keep asking ourselves questions like why and why this matter. And in fact, I feel like that when I keep asking this kind of question, and sometimes what I have sensed to be the truth, in fact, wasn't the case. And in teaching to be critical, John Passmore mentioned that to encourage critical spirit as distinct from professional competence as a critic of techniques, a teacher has to develop his pupils and enthusiasm for give and take critical decision. I felt like this was exactly what Professor Miller encouraged us in doing in this class. For example, like in the discussions, we are encouraged to think critically and to freely share how do we think and expose ourselves to critical thinking without the fear of actually being judged by the others. And like in our journals we wrote in every week, we observed the world and realized that how the assumption we made in everyday argument actually sometimes fall into some fallacy that we may not have realized. And this is similar for how in our debate, which we demonstrate ability to critically analyze the arguments that are in favor of our own positions. And all this expand the capacity of my critical thinking skills. And to conclude, I just want to say that our time really flies very fast, and I couldn't believe that this was the last class of this quarter and my last class at UCLA, and I truly enjoyed the class with Professor Miller, and I actually like the class size because it enables us to know each other names after the quarter, and you can name out every single person name after the quarter, and you know each other very well. And the class did encourage me to speak in a podium in front of so many people, and did increase my confidence in public speaking. And I just want to say that I was glad that I made it, and I feel like debate wasn't as scary as I imagined as before, and I would just take Professor Miller word, just fake it until you make it after even my graduation, and thank you.
Thank you. So that brings us to Nivian. I need your outline.
Just one.
You take one step forward, please. Yeah, perfect.
I know I'm not part of the opposition, but I just want to tell On that his story was off topic. And that being said, So, I spent most of my life growing up in Pakistan, and when you grow up in kind of an impoverished country like Pakistan, you're kind of immersed in like bullshit from all directions with all people, and like just being in a poor country, most people they develop to be like semi-sociopathic all the time. So when you go to the grocery store and you get groceries and they tally up your total and they say this is it, you gotta look at them and be like, bullshit. And he's like, oh sorry, you must have made a mistake. Or if you miss an exam and you tell your professor, oh my grandmother passed away, or something even to that extent, the professor looks at you and says, bullshit. And as odd as that may seem, to survive like as a street smart person in a place like that, your default position to everything anyone says to you is bullshit. And that's the only way to survive, because you can't just accompany all that type of misdirects that people are trying to do. So when I came into this class, I think my bullshit detector was well calibrated and it had a lot of miles on it. And the thing was that to transfer using a bullshit detector in a practical sense to using it in an academic sense, and I think it was not that much different. I think that just the fact that if I stayed attentive and not just listening passively, that makes all the difference. But one thing that I realized in this class is that probably the most valuable thing is when people got up and they talked, because by that you understand an intuition of how the public thinks. And one thing that I realized over the class is that bullshit actually works. And that's why people use it. I mean, even in the public domain and all these higher positions, you still see people using bullshit. And sitting in, like, when I was listening to debates, and sometimes someone would make a point, and I'll just look at it and be like, that's a horrible point. And then when people would get up and comment, they would say things like, oh, when you said that point, it really connected to me. And I'm just like, you know, the one takeaway that I'm going to take away from this class is that I think my bullshit detector should be more calibrated, but I'm also going to incorporate more bullshit in my debates, because if it's well disguised enough, it actually works better than logic and stuff like that. It's just the bitter reality of it. And you know, Passmore said that the teacher who teaches critical thinking should, you know, be ready to accept criticism themselves. So I'll take this opportunity to take a go at the professor. No, he already doesn't like me very much. So I'm like, no, I'm just that's a joke. But I'm just saying that you know, a lot of things that we learn and a lot of things you guys have said today, if you look at the underlying precepts of it, you are admitting to the fact that bullshit works. Once you come up here and you say that it's not what the content is, it's how you say it, and these things affect you and the unconscious and all that stuff. So that is actually you know, how bullshit actually is that. And when you learn in class that how to say something effectively and something to that degree, or pathos and stuff like that, I mean, that is just, pathos is just emotional blackmailing to some degree, isn't it? And when you say something effectively, think about it. I mean, that's all that it really is. It's emotional blackmailing, to use your, like, quote your